Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. As we watch this case and as we wonder the why, from hope to hate, how was Tyler Robinson radicalized? 22 years old. How did he go from a scholarship college student, lo and behold, just for one semester? That's indicative of a problem. But how did he get to the hatred of Charlie Kirk, who was a conservative commentator, representative of the right wing? But how did he reach the pinnacle of hatred where he acted upon it and went to the Utah Valley University field there where Charlie Kirk was going to speak, and planned and showed up there with a 30-yard six and fired a shot into Charlie Kirk's neck, causing his death? Just absolutely horrific. And even more horrific, I find, is the reactions we're getting nationally from different groups. One reaction from the right and a more perhaps severe reaction from the left. But I don't think we should ever champion or cheer someone's death when it's politically motivated, whether it's left, progressive, or right, conservative. Someone being shot because of their freedom of speech, of their opinions, someone losing their life, a father of two, a husband, 31-year-old man who was, by all writings from both sides, whether they liked him or not, a brilliant orator, super smart. And guess what? Not educated in the formal sense. His education was a high school degree. So all of those things, he didn't champion education. In fact, he challenged education. What are you going to have after you spend, $80,000 a year, $320,000 for 4 years? What are you going to have when you graduate with that piece of paper? Do you have $320,000 worth of knowledge? Are you going to get a $320,000 a year job? Or are colleges and the higher education system cheating you or pulling a scam on you? Well, it was some of Charlie Kirk's philosophy. And he would frequently challenge students from these elite universities and professors, PhDs, law degree people from these elite universities. And he would 100% hold his own. But I think that is the good thing, is that there was dialogue. And whether you agree or don't agree, there should always be dialogue. Once the dialogue is over, then we as a society, we as a people, have a real problem there, because we need to speak to each other. We need to know what each other are talking about. We need to be open-minded to ideas, and whether we agree or disagree, don't shut your mind off to ideas, because I think that's the most important thing. Be open to ideas. Anyway, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee, hold on to your thoughts. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
To get to the root of Tyler Robinson's radicalization, you have to understand the world he came from. Washington County, Utah. It's a quiet, conservative corner of the American West, a place where community ties are strong and traditional values run deep. Robinson grew up here in a 6-bedroom house with his parents and 2 brothers in a neighborhood where most families knew each other. By all accounts, his childhood was unremarkable. Neighbors remembered him as a quiet, smart kid who never caused any trouble. He was part of a loving family that would often go camping and hunting together. Like many in their community, the Robinsons were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Public records show his parents were registered Republicans. Tyler was registered to vote, but with no party affiliation. He even earned a scholarship to the Utah State University, but he left after just one semester, deciding instead to enroll in an electrical apprenticeship program closer to home. There were, however, early signs of political friction. According to family members who later spoke with investigators, the Robinsons didn't like Charlie Kirk. In family discussions, they described Kirk as someone who was full of hate and spreading hate. At the time, though, it seemed like nothing more than the kind of political arguments happening in households all over the country. It was a feeling, an opinion, not yet an obsession. In the quiet, orderly world of Tyler Robinson, there was no sign that his family dislike would curdle into a motive for murder. The person his neighbors knew wasn't a killer in waiting. He was just a quiet kid from a small town, no different from anyone else. So how were the seeds of discontent sown? So what was the turning point? The road from quiet neighbor to political assassin is never a straight line. For Tyler Robinson, the journey didn't start with a bang, but with a slow, creeping sense of frustration. After briefly attending a four-year university, he had returned home to learn a technical trade. An analysis of his digital life, pieced together from recovered devices, suggests a growing sense of being left behind. In anonymous online forums, he wrote about feeling like a spectator in a world that was moving on without him. At first, he wasn't an overtly political commentator. His early posts were filled with a familiar modern apathy, a feeling of being powerless against huge unseen economic and cultural forces. It was during this time that his family noted that he had become more political in recent years. This wasn't a sudden awakening, but a gradual shift. His general unhappiness began looking for a specific target. So, sort of disturbing, right? Like this is how he became this man and got radicalized. But it's not like we're going to see one event, one single catalyst that turned him into the assassin of Charlie Kirk. Joining me today as a co-host is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, an attorney at law. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good to see you. Thank you for having me on this afternoon. Thank you.
You know, Mike, there's so many questions about this, and I think in the speed that the media and even law enforcement, they want to get this information out, there's a lot of misinformation going out there. So now we've seen so many pictures and we know how he was caught. We know a little bit about his background, but a lot, as I said, a lot of misinformation. What made this young man, who we see in this picture here, in this mugshot, this 22-year-old man, what turned him from an electrician, a smart kid who was offered a scholarship to Utah State University, what turned him in to an assassin, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, it didn't take long. There's probably when he finished high school and went off to college, he may have been dissatisfied with the college experience, being in a dorm, feeling like you're one, even though you've got a great scholarship, feeling like you're just a one in the herd. Nobody recognizes you, because that could be very intimidating for kids. Falling in with different groups on campus, everybody wants to try something different. And that's a beautiful thing about college. It opens up your mind to all kinds of different possibilities, making friends with, and seeing people you never knew before. But in our culture today, it's much different than it was, say, 20 years ago when he was born, because we have so much more of the internet. There's so many more groups out there. There's, you have Antifa groups, you have Christian groups, you have Jewish groups, you have Muslims group, you have all kinds of groups out there looking for members, trying to get you to be a part of their world. And so there's good and there's bad. Maybe feeling like a small crumb, and in a big area, big pond, or whatever prop thing is. He's just looking for some identity, looking for a cause that is bigger than himself, that he could actually be a part of and feel proud of. And after a while, he may have drifted, because he's always online gaming and things like that. He's always looking at Reddit and in various chat rooms with people, which the FBI will be looking at soon. But somewhere along the line, probably within the last 36 months, he turned into a kid who was shy, a little bit introverted, very bright, looking for a future, trying to figure out who he is. And he became vulnerable to some sort of dark forces on the internet, and we'll find out who they are. But his dissatisfaction turned into hatred. His hatred experienced the hatred. It came out and it became an action. So it goes from a feeling to an action. And he killed Charlie Kirk, who probably, if he had been one of those kids standing in front of the microphone, they could have actually had a really good dialogue. But his hatred and the hatred of other people in that group just spurred him on to kill.
100%. Someone from the chat, Schuler or Schuyler, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. What radicalized Tyler? His family? Schuler, I would question, what part did his family have in this? Didn't they see Tyler going off the rails? Didn't they see him having some mental health issues? The father obviously knew he had guns. What was their role in perhaps when he showed such deep hatred for Charlie Kirk? Couldn't or wouldn't the family have thought to intervene and to say, wait a minute, you're going down the wrong path, dude. You better change your whole philosophy here. There's too much hatred here. But we don't know. Maybe the family was feeding into this. What we just learned in the last 24 hours, and it was rumored to be, was that Tyler had a transgender roommate. And the only name we're getting, the law enforcement, the FBI is really not releasing out there. The media did. We have a name of Lance Twiggs, who was transitioning from a male into a female. So that adds a whole other dimension to this, because, Charlie Kirk had spoken out against transgenders, and specifically not about their right to exist. He spoke out about male transgenders playing against females in collegiate sports or high school sports or anything competitive sports, let's put it that way. And he was totally against that. Now, could that have been the trigger that made Tyler Robinson radicalize and made him act upon his radicalization and his thoughts, that he brought a 30-yard six onto the campus of Utah Valley University and shot and killed Charlie Kirk? Could that have been that simple, Mike?
Bill, it may have very well been, because everything else may have been intellectual. I disagree with Charlie Kirk. I disagree with this. I agree with that. I disagree with that. But when he started a relationship, or started having a more familiar, intimate relationship with Mr. Twiggs, it may have gone from, okay, this is my theoretical disagreement, but now this is my emotional disagreement, because what Charlie Kirk is saying is this person whom I love could not play against females in sports, because he's going to begin identifying himself as a woman, and it wouldn't be fair for him to be excluded from female sports if he feels like he's a woman now. That may have been the straw that very well been the straw that broke the camel's back and pushed him over the edge, because now it's a more emotional, it's a more singular, personal kind of thing that he now values. And Charlie Kirk has been saying this for many years, but now it's become personal.
Yeah, and I think that could be the catalyst that drove him to this. Was he in love with this person who was transgender, and was he trying to make a statement on his behalf by silencing Charlie Kirk? That very well could be. But again, politics, you your opinion, freedom of speech is one thing, but acting upon it to silence someone and take their life is another thing. This is a former FBI profiler talking about the possibilities in regards to Tyler Robinson.
And could be radicalized enough to plan and then commit such a profoundly devastating act. Let's bring in retired FBI Special Agent Robin Dreeke, pardon me. He is also the former chief of the FBI's Counterintelligence Behavior Analysis Program. This is just so difficult to understand, how you could come to hate somebody so much who apparently you've never met, that you're willing to take out a rifle and end their life. Can you shed any light on that for us, Robin?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, he fits a pattern, being the killer, a pattern of what we've seen emerging in the last bunch of shootings, the last bunch of years, and that is an arc of violence and insecurities that is being fueled by this new form of online radicalization. You know, years ago when I thought of online radicalization, I thought of ISIS, but now it's these fringe groups that are feeling themselves victimized, that see themselves as victims and wound collectors, as we call them. And what's happening is Charlie Kirk represented everything he wasn't. This is as we saw by, what Paul Moore was describing, this lack of a really clear plan executed really poorly shows his really low thinking here, didn't have a great plan, and he really wasn't locked on to who he actually was, whether it's etchings that are all over the place, his plan was all over the place, his ideology was all over the place. Meanwhile, what Charlie Kirk was very clear on who he was, very clear on his belief systems, and most importantly, he could articulate it, he could argue it, and he embodied what everyone is missing on this thing right now. He was curious. He was curious about people that thought like him. He was curious, most importantly, about people that didn't think like him. And this individual that killed him was never curious, not once. And so that is really the fuel that fired him up to do this heinous thing.
Yeah, we read, and again, the details will come out if there ever is a trial here. But we read that he sat down with one of his relatives, and they both started saying, "Hey, I hate this guy Charlie Kirk, and he's coming to campus, and I don't like what he says." But how do you go from disliking what somebody says to going through the motions that we all saw happen here? It astounds me.
From the chat, I just want to mention, I don't want to miss this. CC from the chat, his family seemed to accept his gay relationship and allowed him to express his political views around the dinner table. Tyler was an adult. CC, look, every dinner table has dissenting political views, right? They usually say, don't talk about politics or religion, though, at the dinner table or with a mixed crowd, because it's going to end badly. It's never going to be a cordial conversation. It may start that way, but emotions always get high. So, of course, they're going to accept him. He's 22 years old. He's a man, right? We may call him a kid because he's 22, but he could live on his own. He's emancipated. But didn't his family see signs of severe anger, perhaps of radicalization, that would have pushed their button and said, something, we better intervene because something's not right here, and we're a little worried about him? Did it reach that level? Did it reach the level where the parents could be charged, like in other cases? They knew he perhaps had a mental illness, but yet they knew he had a 30-yard six, which he killed Charlie Kirk with. So all of these are questions I have. I also have questions about the transgender roommate who he was living with, because this person, and apparently the name we have is Lance Twiggs, is fully cooperating right now with the FBI. But Mike, this is a good question for you. Could his cooperation lead to them slapping handcuffs on him?
Bill, I was thinking about that the other day, and he apparently fairly quickly, he actually began cooperating with the FBI, which leads me to believe that he may have seen something, some sort of criminal charge against him in the future, and spurred on by self-preservation. I'm going to look, I'm going to help the FBI and give them access to my cell phone to see what, Tyler had been saying to me. It's very difficult right now with what we know, and we don't know everything about the planning yet. But after they get all the digital information and all of the text messages and phone calls and emails and everything, they could see if Mr. Twig was really involved in any sort of planning. Because right now, it looks like he knew perhaps that Tyler was going off the deep end. It looks like right now he probably had a really good idea what Tyler's actions were going to be. But you don't have a legal obligation as a citizen to try and stop a crime from happening. And your failure to stop a crime from happening, unless you're like a parent, that sort of thing with a child, you're not legally responsible if you just know that a crime is going to occur. Mr. Twig could possibly have been considered a co-conspirator if, when he got that text message, oh, go get the gun, it's in a tree, I have it wrapped in a towel. If he actually did that and then hid the firearm, that is a very elementary act that helps further the homicide. He would then absolutely be, because of his actions, be a co-conspirator. But right now, it's tough to tell. I think he's cooperating fully so that if there is anything incriminating, I think he'll be able to say, look, I'm helping you guys. And if he doesn't have a lawyer, he ought to get one real soon.
Mike, that's the thing that I was really questioning. At what point, when he starts telling the police, he said he had the gun at a place where someone could go pick it up.
Right.
Like, is he actually asking his roommate to do that in code from a predetermined location and a predetermined conversation that they have? Because if that's what he's saying, then Lance Twiggs is involved.
Right. He's right on the edge, right there.
It's right there. It's right on a potential conspiracy.
Right.
I want to just read a couple of things from the chat. Bromian, did the parents know the other person was a trans? Undetermined. The New York Post wrote an article about this. Many of the media companies, the CNN, MSNBC, NBC, they haven't reported on this. This is being reported by the print media. I think with the New York Post were the first ones to come out with that. Food for thought with Olivia Maynard. Lance is a boy's name, not a trans name. Well, he was a boy before he started transitioning, and that is or was his name. I don't know if he's going to be changing his name now. Captain Toki, the stuff scratched on the bullets looks like it was written by a trans person. I don't know how a trans person's handwriting looks. I don't know how to determine that. Felipe Cadre, seems like he was in love with Twiggs. Love can make you do crazy things. Felipe, that's why we're digging into this right now. You're right. If he was in love with him, and he may have felt that Charlie Kirk was disparaging the love of his life, and that could be. But, we don't have just one piece of evidence. There's a lot of evidence pointing to the possibility of what he may have done, but we don't have specific evidence. And look, when law enforcement or the media right away slaps in, he worked alone, that, something, they don't have enough information right now to determine that. So when they come out with that, oh, it appears that he worked alone, let's wait till we go through all the evidence before we start spewing nonsense like that. It's been how many days since this occurred? This happened on the 11th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's 3 days since this occurred, and people are ready to make definitive statements like that. He acted alone. It's too early to determine that, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, we're going to find out definitively the more they get access to all of his laptops and, debriefing Mr. Twiggs and with the family also. Maybe he's dropped names or something like that. Find out who he's been seeing, who he's been talking to, what websites he's been going to. My guess there was probably he was visiting a lot of websites that really just were echoing what he was thinking about Charlie Kirk being wrong, and therefore there may have been some really vitriolic hatred of Charlie Kirk, and that may have reinforced an already existing belief, an established belief that Charlie Kirk, is totally wrong, doesn't get it, and sometimes political violence may be the answer. And maybe they weren't saying, yeah, go here, here's a map, do this, like a treasured map. No, but there may have been a lot of people cheering on Mr. Tyler Robinson, in his beliefs, urging him on further and further, going down that slow, slippery slope. And then you may have Mr. Twiggs, his love for Mr. Twiggs, saying, I love you, and I'm going to show you how much I love you. And by killing the person who rejects you the most, Mr. Kirk. There's probably a lot of involvement by many people, but is it the kind of involvement that actually makes them legally a co-conspirator? That's the question that the law enforcement has to answer.
We will see that. Folks, I'm really happy to read your comments in the chat. Let's keep it respectful. Let's keep it intelligent, and I'd be happy to read them. I'm going to read some of them now. CC, Twiggs showed the police his texts, but only saved the ones he was willing to show. I'm sure they think he's involved still. Well, CC, one of the things is that the police want to do, they want to keep him talking. And I had a discussion with Professor Mike yesterday. Look, what happens at some point, Mike, where Lance Twiggs crosses the threshold of probable cause? At that point, which means facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime was committed and the person telling you this information is the one that committed the crime, right? Once he crosses that threshold to probable cause, what is the FBI required to do at that point, Mike?
Well, at that point, if they're going to charge him, then they have, and then it becomes an interrogation. They have to read him his rights, and he gets a lawyer. And, depending on how smart he is, we'll see. But, they could just sit there and say, look, the FBI is looking to be supportive, and maybe they're not even looking to a federal charge. So they might be just doing a lot of technical stuff. And it's the local police, the state police in Utah that may have, maybe the principals in this case. If they feel that it's going over, look, they could lock that person up immediately. As you know, as soon as they feel we've hit the threshold of probable cause, they could lock him up immediately, or they could interview him in a place where it's not coercive, where it's at his home, at his place of work, in a park, and talk to him there. And you don't have to then read him Miranda while you ask him questions. So depending on
Mike, let me stop you for 1 second.
Yeah.
If he crosses that threshold where they determine, he's involved, he's arrestable, don't they have to read him Miranda right then?
Only if they're going to do a custodial interrogation where it's very coercive atmosphere, but
Mike, if you use the information he tells you, right,
while
he's still, i.e., you're saying he's not in custody,
right?
But if you go use it and send agents out based on what he just told you, and then you further that investigation or lock someone else up, isn't that you're playing dirty pool if you don't arrest him? That's a slippery slope, I think.
Well, it's like anything else. There's the rules and there's the exception to the rules. I think depending on how you play it, if you talk to him outside of a police station, you talk to him on the phone, you talk to him in his attorney's office. Of course, the attorney then, of course, is going to want Miranda. But if you talk to him in a different, other kind of setting where they are in control, where they feel like they're in control, and you won't have to read Miranda. Miranda only covers that really small area. It's a very small umbrella. It only covers that interrogation post arrest, that custodial interrogation. But if it's not, if they want to just talk to him very nice, and have a cup of coffee with him and let him know, look, you're free to go anytime you want, or we'll go to your house, and where somebody feels like they're in control. There's no coerciveness. That should be enough to avoid having to read Miranda, because once you read Miranda, as you know, the alarm bells usually start going off in the person's head, and they're like, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble. So you want to try to avoid that if you could.
Yeah, I guess so. CC from the chat, I heard the trans was about to transition, so it's hard to know if Tyler's family knew much. California privacy writes he had a gun. Let's see. Zizians. We actually did a bunch of shows on the Zizians. Zizians should be investigated. I think they are. They're a trans cult that are from the northwest of this country, and they've been involved in at least 5 murders that we know of. Christopher Comatini, what is the FBI going to do with all the footage of Robinson in a maroon shirt? Look, they'll determine what's real and what's not real, and they'll use what's evidence and what's not evidence. There's a lot of false things coming out in regards to this case. Dark Corner, they need a Utah solitary confinement cell together as far as I'm concerned. Let's see. That girl, an entitled kid who wanted attention. Well, he got attention, but he's not the kind of attention I think he wanted, because he's going to be in prison now for the rest of his life. Let me go back to Fox, play the rest of this.
Sounds people like us because we have rational problem-solving skills that this individual didn't. What always plays out in these situations, I think this is what's going to come out when eventually it does hit trial, if it does, and in the investigation, is there's always an arc of behavior that's constantly escalating, constantly being fueled by this inadequacy, this need to control, this need to constantly think and know in their own mind that they're right and correct. And so every time he encounters someone that challenges him, that makes him feel less than, it keeps fueling to that fire. And along that arc, there is always, at least in past cases, a critical moment, a touchstone that sets them over the edge to move from really aggressive behavior, aggressive thoughts and language, right to violence. And so it's never a 0 to 100 to violence. There's an escalation. So we're going to see that in here somewhere, I'm pretty sure. I'm
not sure how long you were at the FBI doing sort of behavioral profiling, but have you seen this change? I mean, I just somehow can't imagine that, in the time of the greatest generation, for instance, in the 1940s, that young American males were thinking and acting this way, or were they?
Yeah, I was with the Bureau for 22 years before I retired, all doing behavioral analysis. And what hasn't changed over the course of the history of our species is this need and desire to communicate. And what has really fueled us for all time as a species, which has brought us great successes, is our curiosity. And when we are curious, we have this great ability to innovate. And our communication skills were always very strong for years and years. And then what happened is we have the internet, we have social media. And when social media hit, people started posting their 5-second highlight reels on life. And we get caught up in this cult of comparison, the disease of more. And we start comparing ourselves to people that are really just putting fictions out there, and they're not communicating. So that need for the interpersonal communication in a positive light is missing, and all that curiosity has fled away from so many people. So yeah, over the last 22 years and plus 8 since I retired, there's been a major shift, not from what we need and crave, but from the ability to actually communicate it.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that you were at the FBI in the 40s. I just want to make that clear. I just find it so weird and so sad that we've reached this point. And I've seen so many lies, frankly, about Charlie Kirk on social media from people who apparently just believe everything they hear or read, even if it's not true. Very sad.
It is. And that's what was great about Charlie, was he always asked the question with that great curiosity.
Yeah, he did. Robin Drake, it's good.
So, look, folks, we're putting things out there because there is no definitive answer right now to who radicalized, right? Who radicalized Tyler Robinson. And what it seems to be, and I'll use the term that Phil uses all the time, when detectives and investigators spitball, or what I would call hypothesizing and theorizing, they look at what most likely radicalized this young man. So as we said, as part of a perpology, or the study of the perpetrator, we look into his background. We look into his digital, as so important, his digital background, his cell phone, his computer searches. Who's he talking to online? Is he a member of some subversive group online? All of these things are part of this investigation. And since there's no clear, 100% clear-cut evidence that he belonged to any organization, but in the interviews with his family indicates that he hated Charlie Kirk. And other people around him indicate that he hated Charlie Kirk. So that's where you begin, Mike.
Yeah, there's not going to be a single touchstone that may have, pushed him over the edge. We think it may be the relationship with Mr. Twig. We're not sure. It could be that something that he read or that really attracted him just a week or two ago. It could be something that he saw on the internet. Somebody had a discussion with him about Charlie Kirk. Whatever it happens to be, maybe it was looking forward to 2026 elections, and it could be something as far out as that, saying, he's going to help Utah stay a conservative state, or whatever it happens to be. We don't know yet, and it may be a guess, and it may be accumulation of like circumstantial evidence, and nothing absolutely smoking gun say this was the day, this was the time, this is the person, this is the subject, this is what they actually said. It might not be something that concrete. It probably is an amalgam of many things coming together to a head, and he probably didn't think this out anything more than a week or two, once Mr. Kirk and his people, organization, when it was put out there that he was going there, that's when maybe the genesis of the idea started. But he got away with the shooting, but he had no other plan. So it looks like that he did this kind of fairly quickly, and he did some things and got away with it smartly, if you want to use that. I hate to use that term, but he got away with it. But he had nothing else. There was no part B to his plan, which shows that a lot of hatred, but a lot of just immature thinking, and he didn't think it out, thankfully. And he left a trail of breadcrumbs electronically. And so, we'll be able to debate this, like what caused this. It's like 1963, Oswald. Why would he actually do it? It could be, why was the Alabama governor Wallace shot back in 1972? Why did somebody try to kill Reagan? Is it mental illness? Is it stirred on by some cause? We don't know. We might never actually agree on why.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the podcast, and also make lots of comments. We love that. It hits our algorithm and helps our show to grow. Now, a word from our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel is the new sponsor for the Police Off the Cuff podcast. FanDuel. Football season's finally here. Have you checked out the latest odds, futures, and win totals on FanDuel Sportsbook? Think the Bills are headed to the Super Bowl? You can lock in your bets today, whatever your game. FanDuel Sportsbook delivers the latest lines, futures, and specials so you can join in on all of the action. I'm eyeing college football. Who's your pick for the Heisman? Plus, I'm loading up on parlays and player props like Saquon Barkley breaking his own single-season rushing record. With the Major League Baseball postseason right around the corner, FanDuel has you covered with player specials and unique props. Whatever your game, FanDuel Sportsbook delivers the latest lines, futures, and specials so you can join in on the action. FanDuel, the new sponsor of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. We're thrilled to have them. Hang on one second, Mike. I had meant to go right to the screen with this. We're sharing this from News Nation with the governor. Here we go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed that roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact named Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mentioned that he had changed outfits. I know there's been speculation as well as to the writing on those casings, those bullet casings, and I believe we have that as well. And I will share that with you now. So the area north of Campus Drive Road where the suspect crossed over, you saw some of that in the video that we released last night, consists of a grassy area with trees on the edge of the UVU campus. Investigators discovered a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a dark-colored towel. The rifle was determined to be a Mauser Model 98 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle. The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital O-W-O, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO.
Thank you for watching.
So there are so many different aspects. It's, some of you folks are suggesting that that Tyler is like Kohberger. He's nothing like Kohberger. Kohberger was a would-be serial killer that got caught after his first mass killing. Totally different animal. This guy, Tyler, was motivated by politics, by political speech, by political thought. And that's what triggered him. So very, very different. And a lot of you folks are wondering also, when he jumped off the roof, that gun he took apart. They found a screwdriver there because it would have never fit in a backpack or underneath a blanket unless he was able to take the stock off, and then he was able to run with it and transport it, and he left it underneath that tree. And that's the part that we question. Was he asking in sort of a code way for Lance Twiggs to go retrieve it? And if he was, that could bring Lance Twiggs in as a conspirator to complete the murder of Charlie Kirk. Mike.
Absolutely. That's why Mr. Twiggs is right on the razor's edge of being a co-conspirator either before, during, and after the fact, or it could just be that he's requesting out of the clear blue, oh, by the way, I've got this rifle. Would you go get it? But we'll see about that. But it does appear if he's going to message Mr. Twiggs about the rifle, it implies very rationally that Mr. Twiggs already knew that there was going to be a rifle that he was going to need to retrieve because, Tyler was going to be out of town for a while. Why would you ask your roommate to go retrieve a firearm hidden in the woods, wrapped in a towel? It seems like a really strange clue. So that shows that Mr. Twiggs may have had, knowledge already of what was going down. So depending if he had actually taken that firearm and hid it, he is absolutely a co-conspirator. But we will see when they get all of the information off their laptops and their phones and everything else and all the text messages, how much, if any, that Mr. Twiggs is involved. He's involved somewhat, but does he cross the line between just being a passive observer or is he an active participant? That'll be interesting.
And in fact, the whole relationship, the whole alleged relationship with a trans individual named Lance Twiggs, here's the picture up on the thumbnail here. Was that the reason? Was that why, Tyler Robinson got radicalized? Was that the reason he had such a deep hatred of Charlie Kirk? Was that the reason he brought his rifle to Utah Valley University and why he perched up on that roof and fired one shot, causing the death of Charlie Kirk? Was that the reason? And we can conjecture here, but the one thing we also have to face, that's his father right there, all right, Matt Robinson. And Matt Robinson turned his son in. Once he found out that my son is probably the shooter of Charlie Kirk, he called a reverend, he called the man of the cloth to come to his house, I guess, to speak to his son. And together, they turned him in to law enforcement. So is that the word or the deed of someone that's involved, the co-conspirator? Let's not forget, Matt Robinson was a 27-year veteran of the Washington County Sheriff's Department. He was in law enforcement for 27 years, and then apparently he was also a preacher. And I'm not saying that exonerates him from anything that may have happened, but usually people that are involved in criminal conspiracies don't turn the principal into law enforcement. Mike.
Yeah, from what we know, Mr. Robinson did the right thing, and I can't imagine how difficult that was for him to have to make that phone call and say, look, I want to talk to the preacher. I think my son, may have been involved in the killing of Charlie Kirk. That is a terrible burden because, if true, if you turn that son in, he's going to face justice. And what justice means for a murderer, having been a deputy sheriff or sheriff for 27 years, how the criminal justice system works. And that he knew that would be like pretty much the last time he would ever be able to see his son, hug his son, talk to his son. Like his son's life at 22, he knew was over. And so that must have been really painful. So it looks like the Robinson family, they had no part of any of this at all, had no knowledge of what he was going to do. Maybe they thought he was just an immature kid and that, it would never turn from talk to actions. But as far as we know right now, it looks like the Robinson family, they did the right thing.
You know, one of the things that I wanted, and I'm going to segue to this just for a minute. One of the things I think almost everyone that's watching, listening to this show can agree upon is that the security for this event was horrific, outrageous. 3,000 people, at least 3,000 people there, and I believe they had 6 or 8 security guards. And I think 8 of they were all from Charlie Kirk's personal security. So the university, Utah Valley University, where were they? The local police department, where were they? I'll tell you right now, if I was an attorney that sues people over lax security, I would have sprinted to Utah Valley University and I would represent Charlie Kirk's wife, because he was a high threat individual. He had threats against him every single day. And when he goes and speaks, in fact, many of the students at the school tried to prevent him from speaking, and they were unsuccessful. I believe they took up a petition. So the school responds to that by basically giving him zero security. I think they got a big problem once some big time attorney slaps them with, a 9 or 10 figure lawsuit on lax security for a controversial figure. Charlie Kirk, a conservative speaker. Your thoughts?
Bill, yeah, negligence is duty, breach, causation, and injury. In this case, you got all 4 elements of negligence. They can claim that they're not used to having speakers like this, but you know what? That's not going to fly, because you have sporting events on campus with thousands of people cheering on a basketball team or a baseball team or a football team. There's a protocol for handling events. Security graduations, when you have all the graduates and their parents, and what maybe they didn't think they would need it for Charlie Kirk, or maybe what they could have said was, look, have a more controlled environment. We'll be inside an auditorium where we won't have the need for so many security. They could hire temporary security. There are so many things that they could have done as university to supplement Mr. Kirk's like 6 or 8 member security detail, and they didn't. If I'm Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica, I think her name is, I'd be contacting the lawyer Monday. Say, look, I got to do something about this. This is ridiculous. They fell flat, and there really is no excuse. This was not a unique event that never happened before. Every college, no matter how big or small you are, you have several events where there's a lot of people coming and going, and you got to set up safety perimeters and parking and that sort of thing. And so what they were thinking, I don't know, but I don't want to see anybody's head roll, but maybe someone's head should roll in this case, and maybe the head of security.
Hernani Fernandez from the chat. Why are you trying to blame the roommate and forget the fact that he was the one who decided to do such? He is old enough to act on his own. Hernani, I'm not blaming the roommate. I'm questioning and putting it out there. Was the roommate involved? Simple. There's no doubt that Tyler Robinson is the shooter. There's no doubt that he planned this, but did he have help? Did he have people helping him facilitate this murder of Charlie Kirk? That's what we're asking. That's why we're putting out these little tidbits. And the other thing, when we're getting to the security part of this, what event on any college campus can you just bring in backpacks or not be searched or not have to go through a magnetometer? Especially, it's an outdoor event here, right? It should be fenced off some way. And in addition, a huge pet peeve, who was covering the roof? No one. That's the answer. No one was. And didn't we learn anything from Butler, Pennsylvania, when the shooter got on the roof and shot President Trump? We've learned nothing. So this security was absolutely laughable. And I just guarantee you there's a law firm that's salivating right now to get this case, because you cannot in this world provide such inept security. And then when something like this happens, who's responsible, Mike?
Yeah, it's the fish rots from the head on down. And so therefore, it's the head of the university and the head of security at this point. This isn't unique. This is not a unique event that's never happened before on that campus. You have these kind of events, indoor, outdoor, large, small. You have them all during the year. There's no excuse. And you bring up Butler, Pennsylvania. At the very least, if you always have small little events and you're not used to bigger events, Butler, Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, that is a huge one. That was a year ago, practically a year ago, something like that. More than that, what are we talking about? Get the ruse. That's so basic. One person or two people with binoculars walking through the ruse with a security guard outfit on would have taken care of that. The shooter would have seen that, and they probably would have abandoned his plans, and that would have been a good thing. No excuse for that. Security 101.
100%. Pumpkin from the chat. The FBI is involved now, contacting individuals. Tyler isn't cooperating. You know, Pumpkin, the press incorrectly puts that stuff out. All right. Tyler Robinson was turned in by his father. Did he initially cooperate? Did he initially make a statement? Only the investigators know that. But that's it. No one's cooperating for days and days and days. Once they realize they're under arrest, they're going to invoke counsel, which ends all cooperation. If you watch this show, you know, once the person says, I want an attorney, all questioning must cease. That are the rules, or that is the rules of engagement. And law enforcement is not allowed. And when the press says he's not cooperating, well, what are they talking about? You know what I mean? Yes, he initially came in. He was turned in by his father. He gave his pedigree or whatever. I don't know what level of cooperation he did when he first turned himself in. But once he's arraigned, there's no more cooperation anyway, because the accusatory instrument is drawn. Once the accusatory instrument is drawn, he has absolute 100% right to counsel. Mike.
100%. From the moment he steps in that courtroom and he's facing the judge, there is an attorney by his side who's already spoken to him, telling him, don't open your mouth. The judge asks you a question, yes or no. You know, that's it. And anytime from that point on, if he's going to talk to the police, it's going to be in light of cooperation to get a plea bargain. That's the only time he will talk to the police from now on, is if he can get something in return. Other than that, that is it. There's nothing going on between the law enforcement agencies and him where his attorney is not involved.
Right. And that would be called the proffer if he wanted to cut a deal. But the district attorney would have to be involved, and his attorney, and they would do. But he's facing the death penalty. So there is no way they're going to be offering a plea deal at this
stage.
Juncture. You know, they're going to see, and they have to keep digging. They have to keep doing an investigation, the digital information, the forensic information, questioning people, the days, the weeks, the months before this. Who was he interacting with? I mean, so far, we're not getting a lot of information, and I don't like it when people say he acted alone 2 days, 3 days after the occurrence. They can absolutely not say that. This is from Law and Crime.
The family of Tyler Robinson may have been shocked when they saw the image of the person of interest who killed Charlie Kirk, and they realized the alleged assassin was their son. But according to the messages that police say the 22-year-old sent to a friend online, he wasn't hiding that he was an alleged political killer. What he said to that friend and how it fits into what police have against a man who is expected to face the death penalty if found guilty. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Tyler Robinson appears to have left plenty of evidence behind after he allegedly shot and killed Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. You, of course, have the physical evidence, the high-powered bolt-action rifle found in a wooded area off campus, and the bullet casings with anti-fascist song lyrics and deep internet and video game references engraved on them. But then you have what Robinson allegedly sent to his roommate in messages on Discord that appears to show that Tyler Robinson was not hiding that he had allegedly done this crime. before I get to that part, the Discord messages, let's get to what really broke this case wide open. It was perhaps as a result of this picture. The alleged shooter wearing an American flag shirt, sunglasses, a hat with a triangle logo on it, and Converse shoes with white soles. Now, at this point, when this picture was first released, he was just a person of interest. We didn't know who it was, but take a look at this picture of Tyler Robinson appearing to be a typical college kid in his dorm, smiling, wearing a similar hat, but also look at his feet. Converse shoes with white soles. Now imagine you're his family and you see the image of the person of interest, and then you look at your son and you realize he's the alleged killer. According to police, Tyler's dad confronted his son about that possibility and whether he was responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk, and Tyler allegedly confessed. His dad then called a youth pastor, and they transported Tyler to the police station, where this 22-year-old may now never see the light of day as a free man ever again, and if found guilty, he will face the death penalty, according to Utah Governor Spencer Cox. Robinson's family said that in recent years, he became more political. That's according to police documents, but we need to know more about that, because it's unclear what they meant by more political. And how specifically was he more political? How does someone go from maybe not being into politics to then being allegedly on a roof with a sniper rifle shooting someone who you disagree with politically? Family members said that recently Robinson was at dinner and spoke about how Charlie Kirk was going to be at Utah Valley University on September 10th for his college speaking tour. He also talked about how he did not like Charlie Kirk's beliefs. Now, we don't know specifically what he said about that and whether anything was particularly threatening related to his thoughts on Charlie Kirk. In pictures, Tyler Robinson seems like he had experience handling guns to at least some extent. He also seemed to play a lot of video games. One of the inscriptions on the unfired casings that was found was related to a third-person shooter game. He also was on Discord, which is an instant messaging platform that is often used by people who play video games, and this is where we see the messages that Robinson allegedly sent to someone who police refer to as his roommate. It's unclear whether it was his college roommate or if he was living somewhere else. Robinson did spend a semester at Utah State University, we learned. Now, police contacted that roommate, and the roommate showed them messages that Tyler allegedly sent him. The affidavit reads that Tyler stated he needed to, quote, retrieve a rifle from drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from that contact, Tyler, also mentioned that he had changed outfits, end quote. Now, those details appear to match with the evidence that police found, like the gun, in the wooded area just off of campus where they saw that person of interest run through.
So could that message have been meant for several people? And was it meant for at least one who he expected or was asking, in fact, to pick up that rifle at the drop point? And if that's true, then the person, or if there is a person or persons that did attempt to retrieve the rifle, that person or persons could be charged in this conspiracy. However, it appears that law enforcement recovered the rifle before anyone else that could have been a would-be conspirator to pick up the rifle. Mike.
Yeah, the timeline is very condensed because you got from the time Charlie Kirk was killed to the time Tyler was arrested, it was about 33 hours. So it's around noon or the morning of one day to about 10:30, 10:45 the following day. So a lot happening in between that period of time. Yeah, if that message had gone out to several people, hey, could you just pick this up? And they're going to have a lot of explaining to do, and Mr. Twiggs has a lot of explaining to do also. That's why I would imagine, and I said earlier at the top of the show, if he doesn't have an attorney, he ought to get one, because the police may be looking at him too, because he may have passed over that fine line from just being a passive observer, knowing a few things, to actually being a co-conspirator. All it takes is one thing, and one action alone could put you in prison for a good long stretch in this case. Absolutely.
T-Rex and Crypto Travels, thank you so much for the 1999 super sticker. Charlie wasn't even wearing a plate. I think Charlie team thought that not having massive security would lead to more open debate. His head of security can be seen to his right, scanning the crowd. with security, really it's the more the merrier. The more people you have, the more types of impediments to a would-be attacker you can put out there. And some of the things that they neglected to do is security 101. Checking bags, having someone watch the roofs. All of those things they didn't do. And having 8 people work a crowd of 3,000 is so inadequate as to be an absolute joke. And that's why we said earlier on, some law firm is salivating right now to get this case to sue this college for lax security on this date, causing or contributing to Charlie Kirk losing his life. Mike.
Yeah, it was Mr. Kirk travels with like a group of 6 or 8, and that's a good start, but that's not the end. You have to have cooperation with the host institution to cover all of the other things. I mean, because 6 or 8 people, you're talking just the area behind Mr. Kirk, the areas to the left and to the right, and maybe 1 or 2 people walking around, but you won't have command of any kind of stairwells, any kind of porches, any kind of windows, any kind of roofs. That you need a lot of help with. So I'm hoping that, and I would imagine that Mr. Kirk's security team asked of the college's security department, please have enough people on hand. Could you please help us with this? We need a few people. We got the lower area, but we don't have the upper area. And I think to nowadays, especially after 9/11 and all the security you got when you have to travel, I don't think people would really be upset if they had to go through some sort of metal detector or have a uniform security look in your bag as you're going into a stadium, into a courtyard, even into an auditorium indoors to see. I think people are really used to it. I don't think people would be upset. I don't think it'd be, bothersome to anybody. And I think they would expect it, quite frankly. And I think they should expect that sort of thing because, crowds are dangerous places at basketball games, on the street. These bad things happen sometimes when you get large groups of people together because of that human dynamic. If there's any sort of violence, there should have been a lot more effort put into safeguarding Mr. Kirk. Definitely.
Absolutely.
And coming to the realization that your son is the person who did this, allegedly, he'll go through the legal process and we'll see how it all plays out. But at the same time, for people, if they had looked at that picture and they said, that's definitely Tyler Robinson, and they didn't come forward, would that have opened them up to potentially being arrested if later found? I mean, how does that typically handle when you're trying to figure out who might have known this? Because it does seem in this case it worked out and everybody was honest, bringing him forward, even members of his own family.
Yeah, if someone just recognizes him, we're never going to know that. There could be 10 people right now who recognized him, but are afraid to give up a friend or get involved in all that. And you see that every day, that people just don't want to make that step and get involved. But, if you're harboring him, if you take him into your house, if you help in getting him away or hiding him, that's a totally different charge, a totally different world that they would be wrapped up in. And that's when you get into trouble. But just seeing it, that we're probably not going to know. But like you just said, Chris, the thought of his father watching the news and just getting an update on what happened and hearing the news, oh, we have some images that we're going to release to the public, and seeing that it's your son. I can't even describe what that must have felt like for him.
And what the car ride, I know he called a youth pastor, and they brought him to police headquarters because that it is likely, if all of this is true, he's never going to see the light of day as a free man ever again at 22 years old, but certainly took the life of Charlie Kirk, allegedly, who was 31 years old. When you look at how that happened, and I'm not a gun owner myself, Tom, but I know it was 150 to 200 yards, this shot that was done. There are pictures of Tyler Robinson where it seems like he was familiar with firearms. Based on what we know with this high-powered bolt-action rifle with a scope, I mean, how much training would you need or practice would you need to do the type of shot that he did?
With the type of scope that is being out there that he used, Not that much, Chris. You could go a couple of times and practice with it. If you hunt once, 2-3 times a year, you could get familiar with that weapon. He was in a prone location or prone position, no one around him, laying down with that high-powered scope. It's actually, disappointing to say, but not that hard of a shot if you're familiar with that weapon, which he was. So it made the shot even easier for someone like him.
I've heard this before. In fact, James Gagliano, who is a retired FBI supervising agent in charge, he was on one of the shows yesterday, and he said the same thing, that 200 yards is a relatively easy shot with a 30-yard 6 that has a scope. And I didn't think so. I mean, he's obviously much more knowledgeable about firearms than I am. I know he was in charge of the FBI SWAT team. So he's got a lot of training in that area. And many people have said a 30-yard 6 with a scope, that's not a difficult shot. And we saw the results that Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, and pretty much it looked to us, if you ever watched that video, that he was perhaps dead on the scene or paralyzed on the scene. I saw a doctor analyze the video, and he said his spinal cord was severed with that shot. So he would have been paralyzed had he lived. And they also believed that it took out the jugular and the carotid artery. So I don't think there was any recovery from that. But as far as from the distance of that shot, I think it was it shows at least a proficiency with firearms.
Yeah, Bill, the 30-yard 6, it's one of those hunting rounds that people use. It's a bolt-action rifle, very accurate. If that's a Mauser 98, I think is what they refer to it as, that's the standard rifle of the Wehrmacht in World War I and World War II. We used, I think, 30-yard 6 in World War II American rifles. So therefore, the trajectory is absolutely flat. It's really fast, and it's favored by hunters nowadays because you don't have to worry about any kind of arcing. You couldn't make that shot with the 22, and probably you'd have the arc would be like a rainbow. But with that firearm, it's flat. It's flat as a pancake, and therefore it went true. And there was no obstructions. Clear day. Mr. Kirk wasn't moving, and around 200 yards with a scope. Sadly, it was probably an easy shot for somebody who has just a little bit of training. Like that gentleman said, just a little bit of training, a little familiarity. If you've hunted once or twice, you know how the rifle works. You probably know what your limits are in making that shot and your skill level. And one shot, and that was it.
Absolutely. Joseph Watley crawls down with no rifle, runs with no rifle, and yet it was in the woods. Joseph, if you notice, he's got a backpack on his back. And all he did, because they found the screwdriver, he disattached the stock. And so the gun either fit in the backpack or he had it wrapped in a blanket. But there's no doubt when he jumped off that roof, he had the rifle with him because he dumped it in the woods and they found it. And it is, in fact, the gun. So I'm not sure what you're seeing. I know what you're seeing, but he had the gun with him because they found it in the woods. So there's lots of things. There's going to be all kinds of things made up about this case. I've read a lot of things myself that just aren't true. This is Paul Morrow, and he's on Fox News. He's a retired NYPD inspector, and he's really a bright guy. He's got a great deal of investigative experience, but he also seems to me, when you watch a lot of these news stations, he definitely seems to me like a man of reason, besides the fact that he's very smart. I'm going to play Paul Morrow here.
Fox News contributor. He's live at the campus of Utah Valley University. Paul, good to have you with us today. I know that you've been talking to students on campus. I heard you this morning say that you were impressed with the young people there. And we know that the governor, Spencer Cox, said that he felt the same way, Paul. And I just, to that point, I want to put up these images. These are images from May 2020 after the George Floyd riots in big cities. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, Charlie Kirk peaceful vigils in recent days. So we're putting those up right now. And you can see just the dramatic difference. And this is what Spencer Cox, the governor, had to say about that, Paul. And then I want to get your reaction.
I want you to look at how Utahns reacted the last 2 nights. There was no rioting. There was no looting. There were no cars set on fire. There was no violence. There were vigils and prayers and people coming together to share the humanity. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe is the answer to this.
Paul Morrow, your thoughts as you get deeper into this situation on the campus where it all happened.
Well, the governor is exactly accurate. I've been here now for the last 2 days, wire to wire, and we've talked to a lot of the people here. I was just talking to a group of students here, and they're it sounds strange to say, but they're little adults. You know, they're civically engaged. They're smart. They have considered their political opinions. In fact, 2 of them just told me we didn't entirely agree with Charlie. But that said, we're out here to support him now. And this is waking people up here and in campuses across the country. Neither one of the 2 I just spoke to, in fact, were actual Turning Point USA members, but say now they will. And I think the message there is that Charlie Kirk's legacy is only going to grow, and exactly what the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, attempted to stamp out is going to have the opposite effect. And it just does show you the power of speech. And these kids are awake to it. I'm hearing it elsewhere in the country through sourcing up at Harvard and other areas that the conservatives, or even just people that are advocates for free speech, are not having this.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see if it fuels that kind of passion and commitment. And we've seen that in prior tragic instances in the United States, thinking back to the civil rights movement and the people who lost their lives to assassination during that period. And Charlie stood for freedom of speech in the country and open dialogue. So we'll see where that goes. I want to play something else for you because I want to draw on your expertise as a police and investigator, as a member of the police and investigator. This is Spencer Cox talking about these messages that were exchanged with a roommate. And can you shed any light, Paul, on this roommate? And is this roommate in the house that we're looking at or somewhere else? Here, let's listen to it first.
The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique.
So what questions does this raise about the roommate and what he or she might have known?
So let's remember in the Boston Marathon bombing, 2 roommates were arrested subsequent to the death and then arrest of the Tsarnaev brothers because one obstructed justice and one lied to the federal government, which is a crime in the course of an investigation. So this person had better be forthright. And I think the really salient point is that if they develop a co-conspirator from online stuff in Discord or elsewhere, that puts you in a conspiracy bucket federally because the internet gives you federal jurisdiction. And now you have a much stronger federal charge because right now federal charges are a little tenuous. I would opine this is going to be a state death penalty murder case.
Very interesting. We heard from the governor, Governor Cox, who's going to be on with Brett later this evening, that there was no one else charged at this point. But I think that remains an open question as we get more information about this roommate and what he may or may not have known and when. Paul, thank you.
So much more to this investigation. And we always remind each other and everyone watching, this happened on September 11th, right? So it's 3 days. So to definitively say that he acted alone, I think is ridiculous because you haven't had enough time to do a proper investigation yet. So you can't say, oh, he acted alone. Well, let's wait till we get more information with this, and then we'll make that call. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. We have a new advertiser. FanDuel is one of the sponsors of the Police Off the Cuff podcast on the Believe Network. And the football season is second week, and we're all enjoying the NFL, Major League Baseball, and hockey and NBA, and all of these sports are covered by FanDuel. Mike, we're at that point. Your final thoughts.
The shooting, like the shooting of the two state senators up in Minnesota months ago, there's no way to go with political violence from any side. People should, strive to be more like Voltaire. I may not agree with anything you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. Not everybody here on this panel agrees with everything Charlie Kirk said, but we defend to the death his right to say it peacefully. And people should, and all those who disagreed with him have the right, and I will defend to the death their right to say and hold their point of view. But violence is never, ever going to get you anywhere politically.
100%. Someone just corrected me and said, Louise Wannick Eggleston, it happened on September 10th. Then I stand corrected. It's 4 days ago. But I'm just sort of making the statement that in 4 days is not enough time to do a proper investigation and to know exactly and get all the players that may have been involved in this. So, folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I mean, this case is still, even though someone is arrested, and that's a great thing that someone is in custody, there was a lot more to this case. People would always say, in my days in homicide when I was with the NYPD, they would say, oh, you made an arrest. That's it. The case is over. And you say, no, the case has just begun. Now we have to put the case together for prosecution. It's not over and done with once an arrest is made. So I want everyone to know that this case is not over and done with because an arrest is made. And I think also there needs to be other agencies that comb through this campus and do a complete in-depth investigation on the porous security on that day, the horrific security on that day. And that needs to be part of this investigation, because the why a national figure who's a conservative speaker had 8 security guards guarding him in basically an open field where 3,000 people were, and didn't have the security to protect him. That's something we also need to know the answer to. And right now, we don't have the answer to that. So, folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. On behalf of myself and my co-host, Professor Mike Geary, have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.